Hello everybody, I hope this finds you well and I hope you can hear what's going on. I am just going to set up a little bit of a sharpening station. I need to do some hook knife sharpening and I figured this would be a really good way to talk about, kind of the different tools that I use and how I use them. So the angle's going to be a little bit tricky, but I think what I'm going to try and do is drop this down so that you can see what's going on. So I might have to crouch. I can do this. Okay. So I'm not sure if I can actually see the chat this way as well. This might just be a setup where I kind of just talk and you guys just hang out and check things out. So I am going to be, So I'm going to be sharpening. I think the conversation that we're going to have today is going to be on, so let me start from the start. Let's make sure I cover some basics. If there are some things that you've already heard before, that's awesome. I'll try and get through them as quickly as possible. If this is all new to you, welcome, and please let me know what you would like to know more about. So the concept of sharpening, just to get right back to the basics, is to essentially bring the edge all the way to the apex until it folds over the other side. And that's called a burr. That little section of steel that rolls over the other side is the burr. You want that to be maintained all the way along the edge when you're sharpening, when you're first putting on your edge. You want to get that burr and then you want to move it back over. And then basically what you do is you move up your grits until that burr essentially falls off, which basically means that you've brought the steel all the way up until it kind of folds and folds and folds, and then you work away that section until it's a nice, strong, clean, sharp edge. The knife that I'm going to be working on today is a hollow ground knife. So there are two different types primarily of hook knives, really just two different types. I'm sure there are others, but let's just focus on the two that we're going to focus on today. The first is what I just mentioned here, is a hollow ground hook knife. And essentially what that means is you have, it looks like this, where you've got your sharp end over on this side, and then there's a valley, and then the back of the blade, the spine of the blade, and you've got this negative space in here. And so essentially what you're left with is this point and this point are flat. They're perfectly flat. And that's how you want to keep it. And it makes it extremely easy to sharpen. And I will show you my process and a way that I've done it that I don't actually see a lot of people sharpening, especially with hollow ground knives, and it makes it really, really easy. So I'll show you that in a second. The other style of knife, which I actually didn't bring with me, I'll have to do a video on this because it's a far more common knife. If you're going to, just get into spoon carving for the first time, you'll have what's called commonly an outside bevel hook knife. So knives like the Moriniv hook knife, the wood tools, the Robin Wood hook knives, those are all outside bevel hook knives. And that basically means that the sharpening edge is on the outside. So what's the best way to describe this? This way, not on the inside. And essentially what you do with that situation is you sharpen the bevel on the outside and then you strop the inside. Whereas with a hollow knife, you sharpen the inside and you strop the outside. And I recommend not touching the outside bevel with any abrasive outside of really, really high grit. So I'm talking like 7,000 and up, or just stropping. Realistically, if you can get away with just stropping, which is what I try to do that, because this outside angle, especially on a hollow grind, is set to a really specific bevel angle. And you don't want to mess with that if you don't have to. Flattening that is not a great idea. You basically want one side to be a little round, one side to be dead flat. So let's get into this. And I want to make this as simple as possible. I don't do anything fancy when it comes to sharpening hook knives. I will just lean this down so you can see what's going on. So, really, really simple setup. Got my kangaroo strop, kangaroo leather, super slim strop, and I have a whole bunch of high grit sandpaper. That's it. And I wrap this sandpaper around a piece of dowel with a little plumber's gasket. You can use a rubber band. It honestly doesn't matter. Here, I'll just lift this back up a bit. It honestly doesn't matter. So all I do, this is quite high grit right now. This is the 7,000 grit. If I were to be sharpening, I don't need to do much sharpening, so I'm not going to bring this knife further down than say, let's say 2,500. So I've got a piece of 2,500 grit sandpaper, and all I do is and like I said, it's dowel from, you know, the hardware store. You get it from the offcut section of a timber store. You can put a couple of elastic bands on it if you want. It honestly doesn't matter, because all you're making sure is that you've got that section is rounded and that it's holding the paper in place. And I just kind of grip the back with my hand like this, just to kind of keep it tight. But like I said, it's really simple. You don't have to work too hard on this. The other dowel that I have is literally just covered in Veritas green stropping compound. It's, you know, quite small. I think it's, you know, 5 micron or something like that, 3 micron, fine grit. And it's really just to kind of get the edge off. So how about I bring everything a little closer, and I'm going to drop this down so you can see what I'm doing. Just like this. Okay, so I hope you can see that okay. Like I said, this is all you have to do. Because it is a hollow grind, all I do is I find a nice flat surface, I lay my hollow grind with the hollow grind up, I take my sandpaper, and because you have these 2 rails that you can see in the video, all I do is I rest this piece of wood on the rails, and the idea is to keep a really loose grip on this hand. This hand just needs to keep it in place, and this hand has downward pressure. And with that downward pressure, what you're doing is you're making sure that both sides of the rails are in contact, downward pressure, and then all I do is while my dowel hand is pushing down, I just roll this hand up, just like that. Now, maybe I'll do it from the side so you can see. So I kind of tend to do this to make sure that it's engaged. And then that's it. That's literally all. If you want to, you can kind of push that way slightly. But at the end of the day, because all you're trying to do is make sure that you're coming into contact with that outside edge. I'm left-handed, by the way, so most people would switch it around. But because I'm left-handed, I'm pushing this way. I've got my right hand holding it, my left hand, you know, my dominant hand doing the sharpening, press down, and then it's just basically letting the rail run along the sandpaper. And because you've got this downward pressure, you're always going to have exactly the same placement. You're not trying to push too hard with this, you're not changing your angle at all, you're just pushing down. And it's really easy, really easy to let this sharpening situation move nice and smoothly. And then there's a teeny tiny little feather of a burr there. Like I said, I really don't need to sharpen this that much. I could probably do a little bit right in the middle. This is really just touching it up. I actually don't want to raise a large burr at all because it's just a waste of steel. All I'm looking to do is just bring this edge back. And then, you know, if you want to, you can check this in the light and make sure that the scratch pattern is consistent. This feels really good to me. I'm not worried about that at all. And then all I do is pop off this sandpaper, and I'll probably look for something around the 4,000 grit mark if I can, which might be tricky because I didn't lay all this out too well beforehand. And please feel free to ask any questions that you might have. Oh, here we go, this is 3,000. So I think what I'm going to do is just 3,000, and then if I can find a 5,000, yep, here we go, 5,000. It's pretty beaten up, but it's going to be fine. And then I actually have, which I didn't realize I did, some 10,000. And because we're here, why not? So we're going to go, these are all very high grits. We're going to step up from, we just did 2,500. We're going to do 3,000, 5,000, 7,000, 10,000. And I'm not going to, you know, go through them to, I'm not going to take too much time with each of these because, like I said, all I'm doing is re-establishing the very, 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 very sharp edge that I already have on this. So like I said, you make sure that you've engaged, and then you just twist, engage, twist. And I tend to do this every time I place, just to make sure, because what can happen is if you get too excited. Oh, another thing worth mentioning is I want to make sure that this is pressing all the way down. Oh, thank you for showing it. Can you purchase this sandpaper for this? Yes, so what I recommend with sandpaper, wet dry sandpaper, just because it's more durable. I really don't like sandpaper if I don't have to use it because it feels really wasteful. That's why I use diamond plates for everything else. But because I only use this on my hook knives, I've had this same bunch of sandpaper for almost a year. You can get this from automotive shops. Amazon sells it as well. But you want to look for polishing grits because you won't be able to get probably more than 800 grit in a hardware store. They just don't stock it. It's just not really, it's not really that common. People don't buy it. Okay, so that was the 3, now I'm up to 5. But if you are looking for it, it can be a little difficult to track down really high grits, but you can get parcels of it for not that much at all. It's a pretty inexpensive thing. But I would recommend looking for a sharpening or kind of a polishing grit that goes from 800 no lower than 600 and try and get as high as you can, really. I mean, if you can, you know, I found some 10,000 grit, which is realistically overkill. I think if you get something up around the 5,000 grit, 4 to 5,000 grit, I think if you're just, you know, carving spoons and trudging along, 5,000 grit is more than enough. There's an argument to be made that 2,000 grit is more than enough, but I think because I like to make sure that all of my spoons are knife finished, I've heard someone say the more polished the edge, the more polished the spoon, which I really have noticed. If you take things up to an extreme amount, you know, sure, after the first few cuts it'll bring the amount down, but if you happen to have a finishing knife or, you know, something that you exclusively use for those finer cuts, getting right up in the grits is a great idea. So we're definitely starting to get a polish there. That's starting to shine, and that was at 5,000. So now I'm going to go to 7,000. And you'll notice that I haven't touched the outside yet at all. The reason I haven't touched the outside, because you know how at the start of the video I was saying that you raise the burr and then slowly work it off. With a hook knife, because you only have one bevel to work with, I find, and I'm sure this is true for everyone, that if you keep going up the grits and make that burr smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, once you get to the stropping, that burr will just fall right off. Now with a Sloyd knife, you want to make sure that you're working both sides, because you don't want to change your bevel angle. But because this is a single bevel tool, it's okay to just keep working on this inside section. So it is getting just silly sharp right now, which is great. And you know, like I said, I'm moving through these pretty quickly. Sometimes if there's, you know, if I was working with some harder wood, I might go right down to, I don't like going down further than 1200 with my nicer knives, basically just because I'm pretty careful with them. If you're reconditioning an edge or reprofiling, then sure, you could go down to 600, even lower if you got some nicks and dings in there. It really just depends. But anyway, this is now 10,000 grit. And also, just to kind of really reiterate that this isn't meant to be too fancy, I haven't been counting my strokes. I'm just making sure that there's, you know, enough. I start to see the scratch pattern on this edge change. It is looking very nice and polished right now. I'm really happy with that. And I am making sure that when I do that here, let me turn slightly so you can see what's going on. So check that and then just rotate past. That is all I'm doing. And what I'm also doing is, because here's a little tip for you, because this gasket is raised a bit, I'm trying to make sure that it's landing off the edge of the wood, or else what can happen is it can hit and throw your angle off a little bit. So you do want to make sure that you've got a perfectly, well, not perfectly, but really flat surface to work with, to make sure that you're not, you know, landing on an angle up or down. And anyway, so here we have a pretty shiny edge all the way around. And then what I do from there, let me bring this back down, is I go to my stropping dowel, exactly the same method. And you can really do this anywhere you want. If you are going to move this dowel at all, move it away from your edge, basically just because you don't want to cut your sandpaper if you don't have to. Okay, we're looking pretty good here. That's looking really nice. Don't know if you can see that, but that's pretty shiny all the way around. There's mirror finish, and I can barely feel anything on this side, on the outside edge. But what I will do is I will get my, let's make sure that you can see this. I will get my strop, and again, making sure that it's pushing away from the edge. I basically just lean it in, watch until the mark disappears. And just pull a couple of passes away. Just so that whatever burr is left, it is completely pushed off and clear of the knife. So I think you can see that is pretty shiny. What I will do is I will just grab a scrap piece of something. Let me see. Here we go. Okay. So let me bring this nice and close for you. So this is just a scrap piece of silver birch. It's pretty dry, and a good way to test your edge is to take a couple of cuts. I mean, this obviously is pretty grainy to start with, so it doesn't really matter. I'll just take a couple of test cuts. And then what you want to do is you want to watch to see if there's any scratch marks around the area. So let's see if you can get there. Oh, let's get that out of the way. Just let me tear off this excess so that it's got a nice clean cut. Okay, so see if I can focus this on here. I don't know if you can see that, but my goodness. It's diving into the grain a little bit, but so not a scratch in sight. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. Yeah, there we go. So that's a really polished finish, actually. I'm really happy with that. So that's how I sharpen my my hook knives, and it works on everything. I realize I've got my Tuka cam as well. Oops, sorry. I hope that wasn't too loud just then. My mic just clipped off. But just really quickly, if you wanted to do the same thing with the hook, the Tuka cam, exactly the same motion. Just make sure that you've brought it all the way around. And it's really easy, and then you just drop the outside. Just really quickly touching on sharpening something like a Mora knife or a wood tools knife. It's really easy. It's a little more time consuming, but that comes with the kind of manufacturing process. It's quicker and easier to do an outside bevel hook knife, but it means that it takes a little bit longer to sharpen. And the best way to do it is essentially grab a Sharpie, and what you'll see on an outside bevel knife, let me see if I can this isn't an outside bevel knife, just so we're clear, is you have, you know what, maybe let me run in, if you guys just sit tight, I will run inside, and I know where they are, and I will bring back an outside bevel knife, and we'll do a quick sharpening. I'll just kind of show you the rough idea. So sit tight, and I'll be back in 2 seconds. I've actually still got the microphone on, so I wonder if you can hear me. Just looking for an outside bevel knife. Is this one? This is one. Find a Sharpie. Yeah. Okay. Now I thought I did have, I'm back. I thought I did have another hook knife hiding somewhere around here, but this was actually one of my first hook knives. It's a Narex left-handed hook. And I will just very quickly show you how I sharpen these. So as you can see on the inside, it's flat, completely flat, which is good to strop. And then you can see on the outside, because I'm left-handed, there's a bevel on this side, and it kind of shoots up like this. So what you want to do, here, let me just face this down a little bit, is you want to color in this whole bevel section here. So I'll try and get it close so you can see what I'm doing. So you want to go right to the edge, all the way, and then you want to kind of make sure that you're hitting the whole bevel. And I haven't done this in quite a while, to be honest. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're basically matching that whole bevel section. Now, what I would usually recommend, again, I'm not really equipped to sharpen these perfectly. Realistically, what you want is a flat. You want something flat. So I could use my diamond plates, or you could use a piece of sandpaper on a board. But because I don't have that right now, and I do have sandpaper, what I will do is I'll try and find some high grit, not high grit, low grit sandpaper, if I can. I'm not sure what I have here. Okay, so this has obviously been used for wood. It's 600 grit, but you could still get the same, intention. Now, instead of doing that process that I mentioned before, where you kind of establish the rail and roll it over, you can't do that with these. It's a little bit trickier. And what you do, what I recommend, is not doing it the way that I'm going to do it. I recommend using a vise. But because I don't have a vise here right now, what you could do is you could basically just make sure that you're nice and fixed in. And again, you want to be drawing away from the blade. And you want to make sure that as you're taking that off, you're removing all the way to the edge. And sometimes what I like to tell people is your legs are your best friend. So instead of just kind of free going, I tend to rest things on my thigh when I can. Then that way I'm kind of setting this angle and just rocking my leg away. You want to try and make as many large movements. You always want to be making large movements if you can. And so to show you where we're at, I'll show you a section that has been sharpened. So that section has been sharpened, and then you'll see there's the Sharpie there that still needs to be dealt with. And I can feel the burr forming on the inside. And then you basically just work your way across until you remove all of that marker. And if there's any marker left, that means you haven't finished your job. So keep going. And I am admittedly moving a lot faster than I would, or that I would recommend you doing. But I just wanted to give you a bit of an idea of how you can sharpen these knives. So, certainly getting there. And just out of curiosity, I'm going to see how this cuts once I've... Okay, so I've worked 600. That's my bevel there, and you can see, I think, oh, what's the best way to show you this? I'm not sure you'll actually be able to see it, but there's a bunch of kind of filings that have pushed up and over. And like I said, because this is 600 grit, it's pretty aggressive. You might be able to see it like that. You can see the filing, the kind of hairs up the top. What I'll do now is I'll just very quickly, so you can strop the way that I was describing before with these, because you basically just want it to be flat. I want to get rid of all that fiber. And I will be the first to admit that I'm being a little bit hastier with this one. the end goal is to take your time and make sure that you've done the whole thing. But just out of curiosity, so it's certainly a rough edge, but it's a sharp edge. And just to prove that it is sharp, let's see. Here's the one with the hollow grind, and I'll just take a couple of bowl cuts on this side and we'll see how it cuts. So it's certainly a little bit chattery, but if you worked at this for a little bit, and made sure that it was all cleared out, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And you know, this was a, I don't know, $40 hook knife, as opposed to, you know, a couple of $100 hook knife. And to be fair, not even in the same ballpark. That's not what we're talking about right now, to be quite honest. But in the way of sharpening something and getting it up to par, it really is that easy. But yeah, I hope that has helped some of you. Please feel free to leave some comments and questions in the comment section. I will post this and make sure that it's up for good. And yeah, please let me know what else you want to hear about. If you want to pick up an Andy Spoons t-shirt, you can go to andyspoons.com. Bunch of spoons up there right now. And I hope this has helped out. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. And I will talk to you all soon. Bye.